Hello, everyone. Welcome to CWR Academy and this webinar, Communications and Development, Strategic Planning and Collaboration. I'm Robert Cogswell, and I'm the Director of Communications for the Sisters of St. Joseph of Orange. And I'm a member of the CWR Board and the Education Committee, and I am your moderator today. So thank you. We were just holding just a moment while we were watching people join in the webinar today. So it's a few minutes past the top of the hour, and we're showing just about 60 participants, and we are expecting more, so they will hop on when they can. So without further ado, we're going to start with a brief prayer, and then we'll get into the dynamics of our webinar today and get to our panelists. So bear with me one moment as I share my screen. All right. Hopefully you all can see that well. All right, we'll start with just a brief prayer that recognizes just where we are in the world today on January 19th. So today, let us pray for a peaceful transition in our nation. Let us pray that together we engage in a spirit of reconciliation, unity, and peace. God of wisdom, we pray you instill compassion and fairness in our leaders when responding to the cry of the poor and the cry of the earth. God of love, open our eyes to see you in the faces of our brothers and sisters. Help us to continue to respond in love by using all the gifts you have given us to advance the mission of Women Religious. Amen. All right. So as you've known from our recent webinars that we want to respond to the needs of our membership. And we have definitely heard that we want to hear more panels and best practices, as well as hearing from our members who have received awards at the 2020 virtual conference that we held last year. That leads us to this webinar. So what we want to do is just go through a little bit of housekeeping. You know, the style, of course, we're only viewing the panelists and you're hearing the panelists. You're not seeing a grid of faces like we often do on Flash conversations. We encourage you to ask questions. At the bottom, there's a little Q&A icon. There's also a chat feature there that you can use when you want to know something that has been brought up during the presentation. Go ahead and use those, and we will strive to do the best we can to monitor that. And if it makes sense to ask presenters during their presentation a specific question, we will do so. Otherwise, we'll try and save some of those questions for the end, and really just strive to go with the flow during our time together. Also, the presenters have offered to share their email. If there are any questions that are unanswered or you have something really specific you'd like to ask, you'll be able to email them later. We are recording this webinar, so it's available for later viewing via CWR's website. In case you have to duck out, or if you want to recapture something that was said, you can go back and revisit today's webinar. So without further ado, please welcome from the Felician Sisters of North America, Deena Swank, who is Director of Communications, and Marcia Wallander, who is the Chief Mission Advancement Officer. And together, last year they received an award for Outstanding Achievement in Integrated Campaign for Felician Mission Haiti. And you may have seen a lot of their materials on the registration page when you signed up for this webinar. So please welcome Deena.
Hi, welcome everybody. I'm so glad we had such a nice turnout. So we've had a lot of conversation in CWR, especially lately, but I'm understanding for a while now, about really wanting to bring in and engage our development professional counterparts. And some of us are the same, you know, one person doing both. I'm lucky enough that it's not that way in my department. And I have started to realize how blessed I am to have this very unique situation where Marcia and I, and therefore development and communications, have been working really well together. Wasn't always the case. When I first got
not for the two of us.
Not for the two of us. When I first got to Felician Sisters, it was just me. And we were in flux, and it was that way for a long time. And just as I was getting my first magazine under my belt, things started to change. So in the beginning, I had no access to development. Every time I asked a question, I was told it's none of my business. I had no idea what the sisters were raising money for. And there was a consultant handling all of the development. So there wasn't even a full-time counterpart for me to work with. So when Marcia was hired, I was kind of chomping at the bit to get into her office and talk to her and find out, what are these goals? What are we trying to accomplish? Because I feel like that's a big part of my role. I was just about done with my first magazine. I thought I was just about done with my very first magazine. So I took it into her and I put it on her desk and I said, what do you think? And Marcia told me what she thought. And she was...
Or did I ask if you wanted a real answer, if you wanted me to tell you just look good?
I think you did. You asked me, do you want the girlfriend answer that tells you look nice in those jeans, or the real answer that tells you what you want? And she told me. And she told me the same thing that I already really knew, which is, what's the purpose? I didn't have a great answer to that. So, you know, she told me, I'd just been told to raise money for Haiti. And I said, that's news to me. So we were done raising money for Haiti. She says, well, why isn't this article about Haiti more prominent? I said, that is a good question, because I didn't know. I had told this very nice little story just to tell a story. And so what? I had missed the boat. So instead of pushing this magazine through, this was the first time we were going to have a publication go out to our constituents since 2016. So they had been 3 or 4 years without hearing any publication from us. You know, I put my ego aside and we sat down and we ripped that magazine apart. And in the end, it had a cover from Haiti and a full middle center spread from Haiti. And it had purpose, more importantly than anything else. It was doing its job, and it knew what its job was. And it wasn't just to inform. It wasn't just to make people feel warm and fuzzy about us. That was part of it. But it was also part of setting up this campaign to raise money for one of our missions. And that was the beginning of a really wonderful collaboration. And a fun, although sometimes crazy, ride that Marcia and I kind of take together. So we wanted to share a little bit of that with you today.
And I think that's important, Deena, and that's the perfect way to tee up this whole conversation, because if you look at this presentation, it looks more development driven, but truly it was a collaboration. So as Deena had mentioned, I had been hired. I was the first true development director in maybe 6 or 7 years. And so I was charged with raising $2 million for Haiti. And I said, oh, I can do that. I've come from big organizations. I've raised millions of dollars. But you know, you come on board and then you see what's there and what's not there. And so this was truly a beginning for us, even though the sisters had been together for a number of years and there were some pieces in place, but it was beyond delightful to have Deena walk into my office with this layout of a publication and really, truly ask for my input, because that doesn't always happen. And I think that was the beginning building block that helped us down this path. One was opening ourselves up to each other to seek input and to then listen. You know, it wasn't just like, oh, tell me this looks pretty, because we've all had that, right? And we've all been there. You know, you put your blood, sweat, and tears into something, and sometimes you just want someone to tell you it looks good. But that's not what this was. This truly was the beginning of a great partnership of working together. So from there, we put together this. I put this plan together. Now, in your packet, I want to say this is a draft of the presentation that I gave actually after I had already presented what I was going to do. And then 6 months later, this was the follow-up presentation so I could share the results. And that's one of the things I love about working in development, working with Deena. You know, it's all about the bottom line. What is the goal? What are we trying to achieve? And did we achieve it? And you'll see in some situations, we didn't achieve everything we thought we could, but that shouldn't deter you, and that should never deter you from sharing that and continue your collaboration. So here we go. The one big piece that you will have in your materials is the actual plan. And I'm just going to show you a picture of it so that you can see as you receive your materials, perhaps the first document. And Rob and Deena, if you could let me know, can you see this document?
Yes.
Okay. So the way I tackle things is truly through these development plans. And they really actually started as a marketing plan when I started 30 years ago. And I still use them today and have redeveloped them in each place that I work. But this really was important because it really helped frame what needed to be done. It also talks a little bit about the history. It also talks a little bit about, you know, the fundraising piece, because that's what I was focused on. It also talks about key players, goals, some of the people involved. What are we looking at? What's the past history? What did we do? How did that turn out? Where are we to date? And then because this was a working document, you see highlighted areas. So several months into the year, I started highlighting what we had done. So I just wanted to share that with you so that you understand this was my foundation. It's a relatively short document, but it really took a couple of months to put together. I did so with a backup budget to all of this. But what I did when this was finished was I sat down with my boss and our provincial minister, who was not my boss at the time, but is now, and we went through this. And the reason I really stress this document is because it puts everyone on the same page. And if you're not on the same page, it's really hard to move forward. So this document, I met with both my boss and with the provincial minister and said, okay, this is what I've put together. This is what I understand. You know, this is where I'm going. Does this work for you? And it was about a 2-hour meeting to go through this, and they both said yes. So once I had that yes and this plan, what does that mean? That means I can run with it. That means I don't have to stop and start and have to worry about those things. That also opened up, again, the opportunity to work closely with Deena so that, again, she didn't have to go back. At the time, we were reporting to the same person, but we didn't have to stop and start. And so I think if you take nothing else away from this, you know, the open mind, the listening, and a good planning document are going to be your best friend. And I'm guessing many of you already have that, but I think in collaboration, so Deena could see what my goals and plans were. Deena, I think it was probably helpful to you as well, just when we were kind of framing how we were going to continue working together. And so this is basically the plan that I also presented to both our advisory committee, who oversaw the very beginnings of Haiti. The sisters started in Haiti with the earthquake, as many other organizations did. And we had 2 sisters who showed up in Haiti with a suitcase each. And from that, they built the ministry you'll see today.
All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about, from my perspective, how this collaboration works. And really, it did come down to putting a stop or a halt on what I was doing to reassess everything, to make everything more purposeful. So we collaborated on a strategy. We worked on building the toolbox. What are our resources? Laying the groundwork. You can't tell the whole story in an appeal letter, but you can in a magazine. You can tell a pretty decent chunk of it. And I think part of our job as communicators too is to keep the cause in the conversation. And I think people get afraid sometimes that when we start asking for money that the tone changes, but the cause is still there. It's just up to us to make sure it's communicated. So when strategic collaboration, the first thing that Marcia and I do, and I think she hates the word why coming out of my mouth. I know that our previous supervisor did. Why? Why are we doing it? We're having an event. Why? We're making a magazine. Why? Because if I'm making a magazine to just make a magazine, I don't know that it's worth the bottom line. What's the goal? Are we informing? Are we raising money? Are we building volunteers? Are we building vocations? And in the sense of a magazine, it's a lot of those things. But for each piece, what's the goal? Bringing all your tools and talents to the table. We are, as communicators, excellent writers, excellent editors. We had, in our case, the extreme blessing of being able to work with a talented graphic designer who brought so much to the table and really branded and gave this whole campaign a really cohesive look. Access to the database that Marcia runs is helpful for me when I'm deciding on audiences for communications, and she knows the audiences and how to handle them a little differently. There's expertise on both sides. And that's part of it too, is recognizing the expertise. Writing for development is different from writing for communications, and I think many of you already know that. But there's a set of rules to writing an appeal. And we have to, as communicators, be open to understanding that, because there's data that says it works. And Marcia can show you the data that tells me it works. And so at some point, you have to understand that that letter is going to have one-sentence paragraphs. It's going to have bolded text. It's going to have underlines. It's going to have exclamation points. It's going to have a PS. It's going to ask for money, and it's going to do it early. More than once. Yes.
Yeah, my direct, as I told Deena, who happens to be a former English teacher, these are not letters I would proudly send to my English teacher, because they really don't follow everything we learned as writers. But that's important to understand, because as Deena's saying, and we kind of, lightly joke about it, I report to an English teacher who happens to be Deena's English teacher, Sister Christopher. But the beautiful thing on my side has been, and I've worked in 25 years, you report to a lot of different people. I've reported to marketing, I've reported to fundraising. You have board members who want to see things. And truly, some of the toughest battles I've had really is really people not being comfortable with the way in which a good direct mail letter is written. And that was something that I truly admire about and appreciate working with Deena and Sister Christopher. Again, going back to that, willing to listen, willing to understand that this is different, that we do ask in the very first sentence. And Sister Christopher would say, the very first sentence? And I'd say, yes, Sister Christopher, And so just having that piece of it, I think, is sometimes can be a really big challenge in many situations, I think, between development and communicators. And I think, Deena, have you ever cringed when I've given you letters?
Oh, all the time. And then I shut off that part of my brain and I say, what can we add? Because that's the other part, is Marcia has expertise, but so do I. And without rewriting that letter to be a communications piece, while allowing it to be what it is and work the way it does, there are things that we can do as communicators. Those underlines and bolds and one-line sentences, those are supposed to be the things that are having an impact. And communicators are really good at knowing which line is having impact, which sentence is having an impact.
I feel Deena's stuff all the time.
That's the other, we balk at repetition as communicators. An appeal letter, it's like a refrain, you know, you're saying it over and over and over again. That's okay. Make sure they're repeating the right things. And that's a collaborative effort. Editing and proofreading, it still needs to be real English. You know, there are some rules you have to ignore, but we still need something that's put together. The language and the stories. You want your development director to steal your stuff. You want her to steal your stuff because, you know, that's how you build continuity. And we have to tell people things over and over and over again in different ways on different channels for them to understand it. And I'll give you one example. Marcia held an engagement event for our Haiti event, and one of the sisters got up and did a speech. And it was because of you we did this, because of you we did that. And unfortunately, I wasn't there. I got the cell phone video of it, but that because of you became a refrain that we used over and over and over again across many channels. And what a gift that was that Marcia was sharing with me, and I was being able to give her back something back as well.
And then from my perspective, you know, what I needed help with, I can turn any letter into a fundraising letter, and I have the data to back it. I can tell you what that means and how to do it and why to do it. And, you know, would drive Deena crazy with, okay, we need 8 more versions of this. What? You know, because we have to write to people who just gave, we have to write to people who gave 3 years ago. And all of those have little nuances. But what Deena brought to the table is she has the voice. She is the voice of the sisters. She is the voice of, she understands, as the communicators, many of you do, is there is a tone and a voice. And that's something we don't lose in our direct mail writing. You know, it's shorter, it's underlined, it's 2 pages, it's a lot of things, but it has to be the right tone. And that's where the communicators, I think, that your best role is making sure that when we are writing fundraising pieces and doing other things, that it's the tone of the sisters or the tone of the group that you're representing.
Building the toolbox. When I got here, there were not a lot of tools. We had a website, a lovely website that was not, I could not update the content. I had to contact a company to do it, the content management. We had no email marketing. We were not writing website articles. We had not put out a publication since 2016. So at least, like I said, at least 3 years. And we had no social media channels, none. What we did have was a beautiful library of photos. We have a photographer, Elliot Kramer, who went down to Haiti and spent significant time down there and just came back with a wealth of photojournalistic images and some video that we've been really kind of using over and over again because of the wealth that was there. We were able to tell a beautiful visual story. We had a blog, which our sisters started and maintain for better or for worse, but they are consistently posting 2, 3, 4 times a week with pictures, with videos, with stories. Oh, hey, look, this is little Jean-Philippe, and he came to us when he was 6, and look, now he's 17 and he's graduating. Well, they might not tell us the stories directly because we all know the challenges there getting our sisters to tell us stories. But we have this wonderful gift of the blog that lets us go on and see that and say, hey, Sister Marilyn, I hear Jean-Philippe graduated. You want to tell me about that? Which became the content of many of our pieces. We had an existing website. Again, it wasn't doing the job that we needed to. So when I got there, I made a quick assessment of what we needed. And one of the things that we needed was this mobile ready website, right? This was 2018. In 2018, you cannot have a website that it's not mobile friendly. It doesn't work. So we got one. We put up a Haiti webpage, landing page. We put up Haiti donation pages. We had email marketing for the first time. We started collecting our email addresses. We were writing website articles now because we could post them every day, and we were going through our publications. And surprise of all surprises to me, I was able to get the sisters to allow me to start social media channels. So that was also a big help. You know, a big part of our job as communicators is to lay the groundwork. Like I said before, you can't tell a story about Haiti in an appeal letter to the degree that you can tell about it in a video or a or a magazine article. So you have to lay the groundwork so that the development officer doesn't have to tell the story. They can do their part. We kind of follow this formula that I credit entirely to Marcia, of need, response, impact, and call to action. So anytime I'm writing, I have Marcia's voice in my ear going, what's the need? What did we do about it? What was the impact of what we did? What do we want people to do now? And it gives so much more purpose to what I do. And it's not always, the call to action is not always give money. So this is not something I just use when I'm working with Marcia in development pieces. This is something I use in a variety of ways. So what is the need? And so when we talked about this formula, the magazine changed. And two of the changes that happened were these 2 pages that became part of this, I think, 6-page spread about Haiti in our magazine. And what we did was put on opposite sides, why are we here? What is the need? And what are we doing about it? What has been our response? So, you know, we took the stats, approximately 4.5 million Haitians struggle to eat. What are we doing? We have a Mother Angela kitchen. And so what we were doing there is putting some concrete information and making things more tangible and making things more real and saying, you know, we have a plan. We keep the cause in the conversation. We tell specific, whoops, I went too far. Oh no, sorry.
It's okay.
Telling specific stories. We had stories in the large spread about one young man who had become a doctor, one young man who had come to them as a child who was hungry, who is now maintaining their grounds and wants to become a priest. We had a water woman, someone who had been in the clean water program who is now teaching others. And the other thing that we do is to keep telling the story across different mediums. You know, the Christmas star story, that's from a recent monthly newsletter. We keep them on the social media at least a handful of times every month. Website articles, and that's the Because of You article that I referred to earlier. So we keep telling the story. We need to show them that there's been progress. I'm gonna click these all up.
Yeah, so Deena put together, she and I, you know, it sounds like it happened very quickly, but it happened over a couple of weeks, and it really did. It was hard on Deena. She had promised this magazine would go out in May or June, must have been June. And, you know, in restructuring it, I said, you know, this would be better served to come out in the fall. And so it took a lot for Deena. She's not giving herself enough credit to really, really step back, take a look at it, have a conversation about it, and move forward with it. So that was my foundation, which was beautiful. My goals, and a lot of this, you know, you obviously can read, but they were pretty big goals to raise $2 million, which I'm proud to say we've already achieved. But it was starting from the ground up without any history or information for at least 6 years. And then to build relationships. These two sisters were down in Haiti. They would come home a couple times a year, go to some churches, raise some money, and go back. You know, so there was a lot for me to do to build relationships with the sisters to understand what they were doing. And guess what? I pulled Deena into those weekly calls. You know, it wasn't just me. It was the two of us with our phones, because they would only do FaceTime, meeting with them to hear what was going on, and really just building a solid fundraising program. If you want to go into the next one. So really what we were able to accomplish was, again, creating the strategic plan, creating different mechanisms that just didn't exist, creating envelopes just for people to reply to. If you have any print publication, please put an envelope in it. You're almost guaranteed to get some type of response. And we call that a soft ask. That's not a hard ask. It gives people an opportunity to support you. We had people giving for about 6 years from the sisters. Other than a thank you, they had not received anything in 6 years. So we did our first donor report that I'll share with you. We recommissioned a Haiti video and made copies for distribution. And we did some short videos that Deena put on our social media website, and we sent out to donors. Deena was creating, I was building a database, and that's, again, that collaboration of why it works so beautifully. You know, with missions in Haiti, you really don't have a group of people like you would with a hospital or with a university. And so we've made some things up like donor committees and engaged them.
And don't balk at communicators, because they are a wonderful way to get your stories. Some of these donors had wonderful stories to tell, and you can help build those relationships by reaching out, because most people love seeing their picture and their name in print or on the screen. So,
well, and the other side, Deena, is, you know, we work in vacuums. We know in and out all the information we need to know. And these donor committees, or just communication committees, people who are out there who have an interest in what you're doing, what they bring to the table is their perspective. And a diverse group together, they don't know what you think they know. We know it, but they don't know it. And that's valuable to know, and what their perceptions are. Focusing back on the fundraising piece, this donor report, you'll see, is an 11 by 17 folded in half update. And the whole goal of this that I worked on with a designer and with Deena was, people are reading differently. And as communicators, you probably know that. You know, they're reading snippets. We're bombarded with information. So it's wonderful to have a whole suite of material that can help you raise money and tell your story. So the goal of this publication was, one, as Deena was saying, why were we there? We think people know that. People in this country have no idea what's going on in Haiti. We don't hear about it. So it was, why are we there? What are some statistics? And that's what you'll see in this publication, little snippets of statistics, and then the pictures need to tell the story. If you do not have good photos, hire a photographer, because again, this is what people are responding to. So as you look at this report, you can see the picture of the sister with the woman in the doorway. That was folded in half. So it was almost designed to be a postcard. The other flip side are the two sisters. They took a selfie with their phone. So we have these beautiful, well done pictures coupled with what the sisters could do in Haiti with their phones, and we combine it. We knew that all of our donors knew the sisters firsthand. So we wanted them to see their faces when we sent out this piece. And then we wanted to see this beautiful picture that tells quite a story. And so if this was one of our key pieces that we started with in this journey. So how did this do? It did incredibly. It was so beautiful when we put it together. We decided we need to send it to more than 1,500 donors, and we did another targeted group from our database and sent it to 5,000 people. And this first sent out, this was the first thing we sent out. This went out in the fall. I started in May, worked with Deena over the summer. We got this out in September, and it brought in about $25,000. This year's updated version, we now do this annually, has already hit about $40,000, and we only sent it to donors. This was our Giving Tuesday campaign. We were low on email addresses. We had about 19,000 people in the database, but we had a couple thousand email addresses, and that was really Deena working to get them, getting people to sign up. But we wanted to do a campaign. We did not want to spend money on printing, so this was another campaign that we did for Giving Tuesday. It did not do as well as I thought. This is one of the pieces that I thought for sure would bring in more money. I think there's too much competition with Giving Tuesday. I think it's still a good idea to send it out because, again, what we did in this piece is different than the other pieces. We're saying what $20 will buy, what $100 will buy. So we are still sharing Haiti. We're still sharing touches with people about what's going on in Haiti, but we did raise about $9,500 and had very little cost. So this was something that we sent out to our email people. This was our first direct mail piece. I'm happy to say that $33,000 is now about $55,000. This was in January. People keep giving after you send a piece. And this is what I'll say about direct mail, and you'll see this in your packet. Two sides for a reason. P.S. for a reason. And this is where you get into, I had about 10 different segments. And again, if you have more interest in that, I'm happy to talk with you all day about that. But these were very targeted letters that told a story, very specific story about Haiti. I almost didn't do Haiti because I had the option of funding for something else. And Deena said, didn't you just talk about this whole repeating thing? And didn't we just do this Haiti magazine? So again, it was just that. Thank you, Deena, for being honest and reminding me to continue down this path. This year's direct mail went out again, and at the same time period last year, we had $26,000 in the door. As of today, the same time, we have $49,000 in the door. So it will keep building and the momentum will keep going. But again, way to tell a story. Acknowledgement is so important. Again, this is something I worked with Deena to make sure the tone was there. And that's when she came up with this Because of You campaign. But we also looked at other ways of bringing Haiti to our donors. And so I asked the sisters, is there something you can make or do? And the sisters came back with these prayer bracelets. You'll see 3 beads on them. We did a little card. Again, our designer and Deena putting their heads together so people understood why they were getting them. But the 3 prayer beads represent the people of Haiti praying for the donors. The second bead we ask our donors to pray for the people of Haiti. And then the third bead represents the Felician sisters praying for both of them. But thank you, thank you, thank you cannot be, you can't thank people enough. Engagement, again, I mentioned earlier, we did not have an opportunity to get together at a hospital or at a university or alumni events. So truly, this was an engagement committee of donors who helped us plan celebrations here in the States and got them engaged and learned more about what was going on in Haiti. When you think about it from a donor perspective, when they get 2 magazines a year, maybe an update, maybe something else, that's really not a whole lot of information. And it's not a good way for us to get to know them. So the first thing we came up with was this donor Haiti celebration. And again, it was just a way to engage people. We brought people to 2 different locations where we had the most donors. We had the sisters present. We had testimonies from our donors. We had Haitian music, Haitian food, very low cost, but just very meaningful. As a result of one of those events, we walked away with a donor who gave us $150,000. She was so inspired by what she saw going on in Haiti and had a chance to talk to our sisters about the realities in Haiti. And she decided she wanted to support us now, not in her will. Ways to thank donors, again, you need more than pieces that will just ask people for money. You also need to bring in other ways of touching base with donors. And again, not a hospital, not a university. We don't have that, or a mission that you can have people come in and make lunches for the kids, so we have to be creative. One thing we learned that was that the children in Haiti do not really know how to create and draw, because their living conditions are so really dreadful that they don't have art supplies. You know, these are people who worry about food on the table. So we had the kids draw some Christmas cards and our designer put them together, but we made sure on the back of that card, we talked about that and showed a picture of the kids making those cards. Communication, oh, there they are, the kids making the cards and telling a little bit about that. Again, going back to Deena, you know, we needed more. We had, when I got here, a little paragraph on the website about our mission Haiti in the midst of all the Felician sisters information. And so I asked Deena, or maybe you offered it, I don't remember, but we were on a roll at one point and just kept going. But we put together, I should say Deena put together a website so that when we were sending out information, they saw more than just a little paragraph. So this website landing page lives within our Felician Sisters website, but it allows us to it allows us to gather all that information in one place. Our videos, our publications, our information, links to the blog. So that was something that was very important, and Deena put together pretty quickly. The other thing I think that we were showing, and you can go back to look at it when you have some time on your page, is the sisters blog. The only thing I really did with a blog, there's a lot of things we want to do with it, but the important thing was that the sisters had ownership of it and they were updating it. So it's not exactly possibly the way we might want it to look, but it's updated and it's done. So the one thing I did ask the sisters if we could do was, and again, this is through Deena's help as well, we only had a daily blog. So if you didn't know the big picture, you didn't have reference. So what we did add to the blog were 2 or 3 tabs that talk about why we were there, what's our scope of work, and then how can you help? So that was something that we did talk about with the sisters. So what are all the results? Again, you can look through this, but the results were astounding. You know, we surpassed our goals. You can see the climb, and the sisters were raising money, please, they were. But we were just fine tuning it and building it. What we saw was that, you know, and we ended up finishing the year, this was January, well over $750,000. We increased our donor base tremendously. And again, that's the goal. You need to have a constant pipeline. One thing I learned in fundraising that I think we all need to keep in mind is you lose 75% of your donors in 5 years. That's a lot. And so for any of our organizations who have a need to fundraise or rely on fundraising dollars, you always have to keep your eye on acquisition and getting new people on board. And that's something that sometimes communicators and fundraisers don't always talk about or think about, but you are constantly thinking about bringing new donors on board. And there I have it. So just to share these little brown boxes, these are pieces of information. When I share these updates with our sisters who have provincial council, I do that because they don't know that. You know, as a fundraiser, if there are fundraisers in the audience today, don't think that everyone knows our trade, because they don't. And so it's important for us to convey the significance of these numbers and graphs and what this all means. So here we have December direct mail results. Again, this was in January, it's gone up to 55,000. But what was important here, a couple things, because some of the sisters said to me, you know, Marcia, we weren't sending anything, and now you're sending a Christmas card and a magazine and a this and a that and an email and a, you know. So I did a test group, and for communicators and developers, it's important to talk about this. Deena knows now when she sends an email, we talk about A group, B group. Should we do this? Should we do that? I don't know. Let's test it. What you need to see here in these green boxes is the fact that the people who gave most recently had the highest response rate. So people who had given within that short time period had a 22% response rate. Then it drops down to 4%. That's huge. They also had the highest giving rate of $223. And more often than not, fundraising is counterintuitive, and you will try to have people talk you out of doing a number of things. And I'm here to tell you, please don't listen, but please test it. You know, I was able to take this to the sisters, and when they asked the question, I could say, no, we need to mail more frequently. This group of people of Haiti donors up above received 6 pieces. This group down below only received 1 piece. So look at the difference. You know, 22% response rate versus a 7% response rate, higher giving levels, all of it. So again, just reporting back to Deena to let her know these things and sharing this. These are just some overall ways that we were fundraising and all the different ways that this money came in through the door. And, you know, the magazine was a big piece of it. You know, while that's communications, I'm allowed to put an envelope in it to get people to respond. So that also counts toward development money. So again, it's that comfortable partnership of going back and forth. This is one of my favorite pictures of the sisters. You know, the sisters sent this to me, or it was on their blog. Deena scooped it up because she monitors those things, you know, and then she was able to put this on our main social media site. So, so those are some ways in which that you can really partner together. And again, not to be afraid about stepping on toes. There are times Deena might post something and she doesn't have time to get it to me for me to see, but we've now done this for 1.5 years. And so now that we've worked so much together, I think we really have reached the point that we can do those types of things and really highlight the moment versus worrying about missing it. So I think that's it. And I think that brings us to about 10 minutes left, Rob.
That's right. And we are getting some questions. So I have some
for
you to toss your way here. For example, do you raise money for more than one ministry at a time?
Yes, you have to.
Okay.
So it's kind of interesting and a little complicated, but the Mission Haiti is the official ministry of the Felician Sisters of North America. However, we just did a count, and the Felician Sisters of North America oversee about 42 ministries throughout Canada, the United States, and Haiti. Many of those have their own directors of development. We have universities, we have homeless shelters, and everything in between. My primary responsibility is Haiti, although now that we have a fundraiser on board, I'm being pulled in to fundraise for some other programs, projects, and ministries.
Okay, and I think this question is connected to that. Do you include Haiti donors in all other non-Haiti appeals? Right
Now, we really only focus the Haiti donors on Haiti. And again, that's primarily because that Haiti is our official mission of the Felician Sisters. I don't think it's bad to expand that, but in this case, with a pretty big goal, you know, $2 million from 1,500 people, that's a lot of money, you know. So and for those purposes, I actually do the opposite, and I reach out to people who've not given, but they're in our database, and scoop them into the Haiti appeals.
Okay.
It just depends on the situation.
Okay, here's a specific question about return on investment. So, you know, how do you decide what constitutes a successful return on investment for your mailings? For example, your Haiti list had 1,590 letters and generated a little over $12,000, while 5,000 letters produced $13,595.
Okay, so those all go back to, and let me pull up my slide so I can look at those numbers, the direct mail results. And again, these were early on. What constitutes success really is reaching your goal. You know, understanding those success rates. So the 5,000 had a lower response rate, and you're mailing to more people, so you may have raised more, but you had a lower response rate. But as I said earlier, knowing that, and I know this from experience, and I've actually tracked it in numerous organizations, and I challenge anyone and suggest really to anyone to go look at your donors for the last 5 years and see who you've lost. But because you're losing those donors, that's why I break this out into all these different segments, so we understand who's responding and what the return on investment is. You'll always get a bigger return on investment with your recent donors, always. But that's not to say you shouldn't continue, and it will cost more to mail to 5,000 people, but it's a whole process. It's, you know, it's like having a car. You can't just put gas in and not change the oil, right? Like it's the whole package that you need to look at.
Okay.
Did I answer the question?
I think
For
so.
that
Well,
person? Okay.
well, she'll pop up in the chat if not. What
Okay.
we're getting more questions too, so I want to follow up on that last one. What return on investment do you hope for when you're doing soft asks?
Again, this is the very first year for this fundraising program. So when you look at the overall, and I don't have it in front of me to share, but I'd be happy to have a bigger conversation with people about this because it's important. The biggest thing I did when I looked at creating budgets and sharing those results with the sisters was breaking everything down into a hard ask, into a soft ask, and then to purely unsolicited money. I mean, we just get envelopes of money without even asking. So what I do is I take a look and assess as we move forward. And as I can see this year, oh my goodness, it keeps building, you know, because what you see with that first donor report or that first email are certain results, but you really need a good 3 years of trending to see what your results and return on investment is. But I can give you a quick story. After a full year of this communication and the results, and there are some benchmark standards out there that can tell you what these guidelines are for a direct mail versus a visit versus grants. We started doing grants. You know, we had a tropical storm this summer, and the video's on our website. I got this video from Sister that morning, like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. You see her in the rain, you can barely hear her, but they'd lost a lot of computers in the room, their lab. And so I reached out to Deena on a Sunday. You need to have a good relationship with your communications person to do that. And said, did you see this? Yeah, what can we do? Let's do an email. We worked 24 hours straight, 11 o'clock at night. We're talking, looking, you know, what should we do? We can't understand it. Okay, Deena said, I'll put some words on the screen. We sent out that email 24 hours because it had to be immediate, you know, because once the tropical storm passed, you lose your moment. But again, we had a year of working together. We had a year of communication with donors. Remember when I said that Giving Tuesday brought in about $9,000? 10 or 8 months later, we sent out this crisis email to the same group of people. We brought in almost $40,000 in 3 days. That's return on investment. And that just keeps building. So I hope that answers. And I'm happy to talk budget and details if anyone wants to email me.
Right. We may have to circle back to a number of questions because we do have about, well, we have 10 total. We've answered a few of them. Let me ask you, do you create a development plan for each campaign, or do you have one plan for all development activity?
So there's one, that big plan you see is an overview. And then within that, we have plans and timelines and budgets. I truly use my budget as my plan. We just started working because we're now combined. We weren't before. So we're now the Office of Mission Advancement, and Deena and I are together. I drive her crazy always. But last week, what we did was we sat down for like 2 days and truly in a spreadsheet, put every single project we have going on for the next 6 months. And we are prioritizing those. We're fleshing them out. We're saying when they all are going to take place. And so they all will have individual plans.
Okay. Someone
and
knows,
budgets
Mhm.
and budgets with both expenses and projected revenue.
Someone observed that your donor report does not include a listing of donors. Do you publish that kind of a report?
No. You know, it depends on the organization. I worked in some organizations where donor lists worked really well. especially I think in universities, and classmates are looking to see who gave. You know, for all of you who went to college and get that report, what's the first thing you do? You look at your class, you look to see who gave, or you look to see who died or got married or, you know, whatever. But in this situation, you know, we did not see that it was necessary. It had not been done. I don't think it needs to be done. We'll never do, I shouldn't say we'll never do one. The reason you have a donor list, quite honestly, is to acknowledge donors. In these situations with the Haiti donors, they are giving because they want to support Haiti. People give $5. I have donors who give $100,000. And so I don't really see a strategy in creating a list of donors for Haiti.
Okay, here's another question for you, and this might wrap it up because we're coming to the top of the hour here. Someone mentions that we send out mailed campaigns and a magazine that overlaps. And if the funds come back in the envelopes, they can see where the source is that generated those funds. Mm-hmm. But if people make online donations, we don't have a good way of seeing what material inspired that donation.
Do you ask the question? So what we're starting to do is to ask what, you know, that's something you can put on your giving page. What inspired you to give today? Some of it's guesswork. We're you know, still in the process that we kind of hit the ground running. For those of you who fundraise, the only time to fundraise is in the fall and December. You know, 80% of our revenue comes in that time period. So when I came on board in May, did the planning and jumped in, it was like, whew. Now we have a new database. We bumped up to Razor's Edge next. Deena and our stewardship manager and our database manager, we're right now in the midst of working together to create our emails through Razor's Edge, because we too have the same problem. Even if we send out an email, we didn't know if that gift came in. You could make some assumptions and a time window, but we're in the process right now doing that. But I think a great thing to ask is, what inspired you to give today?
And thank you for sharing that donor resource too, because that was another question that someone asked. What software are you using?
Razor's Edge.
Yeah. All right. Well, gosh, thank you both for this time spent today. I think it was very productive, and people are asking about the resources that you shared, and we answered one of those questions, that the resources will be available following the webinar. And I just want to wrap up by saying a few things about the awards program from which you received. We are planning to do an awards program in 2021. It will be similar to 2020. So there will be categories of print and electronic media, and the one that you won the award for integrated campaign. We expect submission dates to be May 1st to probably June 30th. And we'll have a new panel of judges. There's an entry fee and need to be a CWR member to participate in CWR awards. So watch for that info coming out in a little while. Also watch for announcements about upcoming webinars. So those should be happening the third week of the month. So you can expect a little bit after February 15th. We should be seeing some webinars then. There will be a survey that follows this session. So watch for that. Please give us your feedback and let us know, what else you'd like to hear about. The webinar will be available on the CWR website. And I think that concludes. Let's see, I'm seeing a few comments, but they're all saying thank you. So that's great. And that's what I want to express to you as well. Thank you for Deena and Marcia for joining us today. Thank you to the presenters. Thank you to all of our participants. And this wraps up our webinar. So until next time, keep up the good work, advancing the mission of women religious.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Bye.